are as we mark 1 year since everything stopped because of this pandemic. A year ago, we were hit with a virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. Denials for days, weeks, then months. That led to more deaths, more infections, more stress, and more loneliness. Photos and videos from 2019 feel like they were taken in another era. The last vacation, the last birthday with friends, the last holiday with extended family. While it was different for everyone, we all lost something. A collective suffering, a collective sacrifice. A year filled with the loss of life and the loss of living for all of us.
Happy Saturday and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March the 13th, 2021, and we're back again with The Deal, and we're glad you're here with us. On the way in, you saw the president, Joe Biden. It's still weird to say the president, Joe Biden, talking about the 1 year anniversary of lockdown from COVID, and things are vastly different than just a few months ago. And you know what? There's a guy who knows all about this. His name is Val Atkinson. And Val, welcome back to The Deal.
Thank you, Ed. Good to be here.
Well, Val, I wanted to lead off with that clip of President Joe Biden. Like I said, it's still weird to say President Joe Biden. I thought we were going to be stuck with Donald Trump for another 4 years, but thank goodness we're not. However, Joe Biden talked about a lot of things in the address the other night about how we recover from COVID-19. And one of the strategies is to vaccinate a whole bunch of people. And in the numbers, yesterday, I think there were 3.9 million people who were vaccinated, which is a daily record. The goal was to vaccinate 100 million people in his first 100 days. And it looks like we're going to hit that number, and we're going to do even better than that because now there's a third vaccine, the J&J vaccine, which is a one shot. And then by May 1st, anybody who wants to get the vaccine should be able to get it. So let's start there, Val. A year ago, this week, we started doing The Deal as well. And one of the things we've been talking about the whole time is COVID. Have we gotten to a place where we can see light at the end of the tunnel? How are you feeling about things after the president's address and seeing the number of people vaccinated?
After the president's address, Ed, I think it left me with a higher feeling than I've had since COVID started. And I am delighted to say that I feel right now that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that we can see our way clear through this. I like to echo something that the president said that stuck with me, and that is, this is no time to take your foot off the pedal, no time to prematurely celebrate. Let's go and do the things that we know we need to do, such as keep wearing masks when you can, and also avoid crowds, especially crowds that are not wearing masks. My family and I have a little policy that if we walk in a store or some type of commercial facility and there are people in there without masks, we walk back out. We don't do that. So I think that those kinds of things, along with what you're talking about, the upping of the vaccinations, J&J just coming online along with Pfizer and Moderna, I think that is going to really give people confidence that they can do these things. He's even given us a couple of dates, starting May 1st, what's going to happen. But more importantly, he talked about the 4th of July, allowing us to have backyard barbecues and meet with small groups. And I like to emphasize the small group. It doesn't mean that you can go to the Coliseum, with 100,000 people, nobody wearing masks. Talks about you and your family and your neighborhood community with 20, 30, 40 people. eating hot dogs, drinking beer, whatever your choice happens to be. And that's going to be wonderful because we've been without that for over a year. And I myself personally, I can't wait to get to see my 3 grands and my children and other relatives that I haven't seen in quite a while.
Yeah, I haven't seen my grandkids either, so I'm looking forward to that and having the beer in the backyard and a hot dog. But on a real note here, just this week the ACC tournament lost your team, the Duke Blue Devils,
Yes.
because of
And we
COVID.
were going to win it all too.
Well, they actually looked pretty good the night before, and I thought maybe they could have a real scare at running through because that's how those things happen sometimes, right? They were playing well, but also Virginia got hit, which is a team that's led the ACC all year, and then all around the country, there's been teams here and there that have either had to abandon the season or drop out of tournaments or forfeit games, that kind of thing. In light of that, things still haven't been settled, right? Things are not done yet. Does it make sense to continue on with things like the NCAA tournament and all that when you can't have a bubble like the NBA has, right? It's much more limited. You're talking about thousands of people in college sports. Does it make sense to continue with doing March Madness and all that? Will we find ourselves having teams dropping out because they don't, pass COVID screen?
We may, Ed, but we made that decision way back when we decided to go forward with this year's schedule, knowing that this could happen. We opened the door to that, and we may see a lot more Dukes and Virginias dropping out. But that's just the way it's going to be. And we may have a big asterisk by the name of the NCAA champion for this particular year. But again, that's just the way it's got to be. I don't see any other choice that they have at this point. It's one of those kinds of things, holding your hands behind your back, crossing your fingers, because they are stuck with a decision that was made to go forward. They couldn't cancel the entire season at this time right now. It would be the worst of all options.
Yeah, we all remember last year, they literally had kids on the court and they had to walk off, before the games even started. But on a different note, still related though, some states are pushing to open back up, completely open up. Texas, Mississippi, and Val, the other night I got a call from a friend with relatives in Mississippi. She was headed there today because her father died from COVID. In Mississippi, they had started going back to church and going to the grocery store, people not wearing masks. And unfortunately, her father succumbed to COVID in the last few days, and they're funeralizing him today. I mean, I still get those calls from people, Val, and I'm extremely concerned that what you talked about earlier, and also what the president talked about, is people letting the foot off the gas and thinking that everything is okay. I read a story about a guy in South Dakota who is just got out of intensive care. He got some experimental treatment that was only given at a few hospitals, but it saved his life. But he had been one of those deniers, right? There are still people out there like that. Um, Now that you have had the vaccine, I get my first dose tomorrow. Obviously, I'm going to feel a lot better once I have that in my arm. But there's still some reluctance on people to get the vaccine. How do we turn the corner on that and convince every single person that this is absolutely important and the only way for us to get from under it? And I really don't want to hear people keep talking about Tuskegee and all that other stuff. It's right here in front of us. My friend in Mississippi, her father's gone, and if the vaccine keep other people from dying, that's what we have to do. How do we get that message across, Val, especially to our community?
I think it's important that folks like yourself and me and other people who are visibly out front in the community, we've got to step up and do more in terms of talking about it as often as we can, and making sure people know that we've taken this opportunity to do so. I saw a little clip with Stephen A. Smith, the sports announcer, showing him taking the shot. And we need more things like that. They need to, the average African American needs to see people that they look up to, people that they value their opinion and judgment. They need to see, not just hear what they're saying, but see them actually participating in the program and taking the shot. That'll go a long way. The second thing that can happen is that we need to have a special vaccine distribution system set up for African Americans, because some of us are not in a place where we have broadband. Some of us are in places that the nearest community center is long ways away and there is not public transportation available. There are so many hurdles to cross that we need to look at that and challenge it as a logistical problem for this community, and not just a problem that people are saying no because of Tuskegee. Some are, but a lot of them in our community want to get the shot, but all of these other logistical barriers are in the way.
Yeah.
So that's what we can do.
Yeah, it's a matter of access. I want to remind everybody you're listening to and watching The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We're in here talking about everything, and we started out today talking about the president's address on Thursday night to the nation on the 1-year anniversary of COVID-19, locking everything down and what we need to do to try to dig out from under this. And one of the things, Val, is that 1.9 trillion. That's a lot of money. I got it out back if anybody wants to borrow it. The $1.9 trillion stimulus package passed the House, passed the Senate, was signed into law. People will be getting $1,400 if you make less than $75,000, and then up to 80 some $1,000, you'll get some, smaller portion of that. One of the things that hasn't been talked about a lot, Val, and I think it's really missed, and it should be the president should take an opportunity to talk about is that the tax credit, the child tax credit. Some people are going to get $250 per child deposited by the IRS every month for the next year, and nobody seems to know about that. And one of the things that they're going to do is travel around the country over the next week to talk about. I got a clip on that. Let's look at that, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. So that was the press secretary for the president, Jen Psaki. Val, she said that the first lady, the second gentleman, the vice president, the president himself are going to go around the country and talk about how the stimulus actually affects people directly. Why weren't they talking about that beforehand? Do you think that would have helped at all? I suppose the Republicans would have voted against it anyway. But part of this plan is to try to reduce, and they keep talking about it in terms of reducing child poverty. Would that have been a better sale, or did it make any difference at all? Were the Republicans just not going to vote for it at all?
It didn't make any difference at all, Ed. The gentleman, and I can't recall his name, he's a member of the House from Mississippi, stated that, stated that he was real proud of the things that were in the bill. And he bragged to his constituents that they would be getting all kinds of goodies out of this particular bill that was passed, but he voted against it. And the reason was that, taking first things first, he knew that if he voted for the bill, he was going to get primary. So the first thing first is to protect my career. And I can't fall on my sword for this one vote here. So I have got to go along with the rest of my Republicans and vote against this bill. Then I'll go back home and tell my constituents what a wonderful bill this is. Look at the money you're getting that I voted against. So first things first, they know without having to be told directly, any Republican who votes with the Democrats on key issues, you will not be a senator or representative after your next election. Mm. So that's the true nature of things.
Yeah.
And they were voting, and this is a serious thing. And too many Democrats think that, well, if we sweeten the pie and put real sugar instead of Splenda in it, and if we do this and that may get them to what? To vote against their longevity, to vote against them. It ain't nothing you can do that's going to get them to vote against their longevity, because it ain't just them. You have to realize a lot of these representatives and senators, they really feel good about their staff. They got big staff that's depending upon them. And when they go out of office, their staff goes out of work. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to do that. They become very close to these people. They got a lot of ties back home. Their status in the United States Congress is a part of their family's presence within the community and all of those kinds of things. It's not just him and his job. When he goes against the Republican Party, he's throwing all of that away. And he says, I can't do, what am I going to do? I don't want to join the Democratic Party. I'm going to be ostracized by all Republicans. What do I do by voting yes on this bill? To say that, oh, I did the right thing. Okay, that's fine. But what are you going to do with the rest of your life after this? And that's the way they think. I don't agree with it. I'm 100% against that line of thought, but that's the way they think. And we need to know that before we try to get them to change their mind.
So you mean to tell me they don't do things for the right reason?
Right. Absolutely. Well, we need to know that.
That is true. You know what? That's also a good place for us to take a break, Val. And when we come back, I want to talk about your buddy, Mitch McConnell. I know you've been dying to talk about him because you don't get to see him every day like you used to. But he said something stupid the other night before the president spoke about voting. I want you to talk about that because I want to talk about voting and voting rights, because we talk about voting here all the time as the way to make change, and we got some change, and we got the stimulus bill because people voted in Georgia, but now they don't want people to vote. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at the clip from Mitch McConnell, and Val can tell us what he thinks about what Mitch had to say. We'll be back in a minute.
To what they call voter suppression. What I read the states are doing is restoring some of the voting practices that existed before the pandemic. In other words, simply eliminating some of the emergency provisions that were there during the pandemic. This is an outrageous one-party takeover of the way we conduct elections in this country, and there will be overwhelming, total Republican opposition to it in the Senate, just like there was in the House.
And welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark, and that's Val Atkinson right there. And before we came back, you saw Val's buddy, Mitch McConnell. And Mitch was, let me find the right words. He's full of shit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the right word. He was saying, Val, that the bill, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, is some sort of Democratic attempt to take over voting in the United States because there is no voter suppression going on. States are just trying to correct or move back to the way rules were before COVID, and there's no problem here. As you heard Mitch McConnell talking, what was your assessment of what he was saying, and why is he full of what, as I said?
We call that the FOSS patrol, FOS, full of shit. So yeah, but he's right. He's a member of it. I think he's leading it. What McConnell is doing, he's doing his job. He's trying to get people to become distracted about what is really going on here, and to think that the Democrats are doing something nefarious, and that things are horrible here and you can't do it. All that's happening is that more people are voting now, and they are deciding they don't like what the Republicans are selling. So instead of putting a better dish on the table that other people may buy, they decide to determine who can sit at the table and eat, who can come in the restaurant, what size the table happens to be. That's not the intention of democracy. Democracy wants to know, how do most of us think so we can be ruled by ourselves, and so that people who didn't necessarily get their way will know how their fellow Americans feel about this, so they can become a part of or decide that they want to do something different. That's what democracy leads to. But people like Mitch McConnell, they've decided democracy be damned. They just want to win, because winning means power. And they think that they convinced themselves that if they allow Democrats to win, then the things that make up their culture, their ideology, their way of life will be thwarted. They think that, and they're right, because things like systemic racism, things like gender nullification, all of those kind of things are going to have a problem when you have an equal society where people have their rights and they vote, they're encouraged to vote, and the people in charge do what the people want them to do. And they can't win under those circumstances. They would have to drastically change their footprint as to who they are in order to get more support from the voters. And while they are doing that, they're going to lose some support from the people that they are doing everything they can to please right now. That's the alt-right.
Yeah. One of the things that is so striking to me is that, they often talk about patriotism and how great America is, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then you go and read some of these bills, and because my life is so exciting, I had time to go and read the bill that's proposed in Georgia. And one of the provisions in there, Val, was that it would be a felony to hand out water or food to people standing in line, or give aid and comfort to people standing in line. And then they had all these other draconian measures in there about, having to prove how handicapped you were to get a absentee ballot or whatever, just making the process really onerous and odious, cutting the number of sites for early voting, cutting the numbers of days for early voting, cutting the Sundays for souls to the poll voting, and all that stuff. And as you go through the list and you see all the things that are in there, there are clearly things that would impact African Americans. So it's a long way of asking you, when, not if, but when this gets to the Supreme Court, with the court that's constituted by your buddy Mitch McConnell, what is the likelihood that they would say all this stuff is fine? My fear is that it doesn't matter what the states end up passing. There's going to be enough precedent by the court as it's constituted now to make it near impossible to get rid of this stuff anytime soon, without having some major federal election law that can pass muster in the Supreme Court.
I think you've hit the nail right on the head, Ed. With a 6-3 conservative court, it's going to be difficult for all of this stuff not to pass through. Double negative here. The problem is for us is that there are so many pieces being thrown up against the wall that some of it is going to stick. There are so many things. And what this court likes to do, it loves to go in and say, the majority of what you're doing, Republican Party, is wrong, it's unconstitutional, we can't abide that. However, and this is where the problem comes in, if we tailor this thing in a fine tailored way, we can see that restricting the hours is not onerous and problematic to all of the Americans, because it affects, to a certain group of Americans, because it affects all of Americans the same way. There is no particular problem in doing something about the number of sites that you can go to, or requiring people to put signatures down when they ask for absentee ballot, and making sure that same signature matches when it gets back in. There's nothing wrong with all of that. But we're going to strike down the felony charge for handing out water at the poll. And most people constructing bills, Ed, they'll put some frivolous stuff in there to give the other side some wiggle room so that the courts can knock that out and won't be viewed as being 100% co-opted by the party writing the bill. So they're very slick now. I mean, these guys are good at what they do. They're going to, the entirety of the what was written by the state of Georgia will not pass the Supreme Court.
Right.
But enough will pass to make it difficult for the actions of 2020 to repeat themselves, and 2021 with the runoff. It'll make it very, very difficult for Stacey to do that again.
Sure. Yeah, the other thing that I have concerns about, Val, is that, obviously the court's going to be a challenge. Like you said, 6-3, that doesn't bode well. But what I also have been seeing some postmortems from the most recent election, and despite the fact that Donald Trump is a complete jerk and never should have been president in the first place, he was able to leech off more Latino. And I hate using that because they were talking about these people in Florida who are white Cubans who tend to be Republican anyway. But Trump was able to win some counties in Florida that they thought Joe Biden maybe had a chance in. But they also saw a larger number of African Americans vote for Trump compared to the last time. How do you explain that? I wrote a piece probably about 3 or 4 months ago about this group of brothers who were Trump supporters, despite everything, because they had bought into some of this Q bullshit. They had bought into, they're still talking about immigrants overrunning the border and so on and so forth. How do you explain people that are Latino? And again, I don't like to use that. And then even some African Americans who, went over to the dark side because they had an affinity for some of this Q nonsense.
Well, let me take the positions of the Latinx, Latino or Hispanic question first. That whole thing started with the Cuban Revolution, or the Cuban anti-Castro movement in this country. And everybody who came from Cuba, we welcomed them with open arms to show the world that we were against communism. And that still lingers on today. And you're not going to get these, what we call Cuban Hispanics, to vote for anybody but conservative Republicans. It's a lost cause. As far as the African Americans are concerned, Ed, you can thank your Russian friends for that. They were really good at getting into black sites on social media and putting in disinformation to getting some of our, sorry to say it this way, weaker minded brethren to go down that rabbit hole and think that we are being used by our leaders, the people out front, they're just using us, and that Donald Trump is trying to stop Hispanics from coming across the border, taking their jobs. And if something doesn't happen with this immigration thing, all Black people are going to be jobless and homeless. And you got to stand up for what's right. And after all, remember, it was Lincoln who freed the slaves, and he was a Republican. So that's the lie.
Well,
that's told.
Well, that's stupid. So we'll leave it there. So I just, it's never too early to start thinking about where you can make some inroads because you got to strengthen the majority, especially in the House, because there's a tendency in the midterm of the president that just got elected to lose some seats, and they can't afford to lose any. That's a narrow majority as well. What can the Democrats do? Because I'm starting to see some infighting like there wasn't any before, but the progressive wing, they had a lot of complaints around the $15 minimum wage not making it through in this relief bill, but there wasn't enough support in the Senate to do it. Are people like AOC and Ayanna Presley and the squad and those folks who are in the progressive wing of the House not looking at the long game, or they want to push Green New Deal stuff or whatever? Are they putting things at risk now that they don't realize? Young energy sometimes won't allow you to sit back and think, okay, let's look at the long game. Are we in any danger because AOC and some of the other ones don't want to compromise at all?
No, I don't think so, Ed. Simply because I think it's something that progressive group has realized that some of us have not yet. And that is that the danger to the Democratic Party is the fracture of our base. It's not going out trying to find that swing voter anymore. That's the way it used to be several decades ago. And the Democrats did well. We did a good job when we could of convincing the swing voter to come our way. Politics has changed over the years, and it's not about that. And the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has gone along with allowing the mainstream Democratic Party to pursue the myth of the middle swing voter, knowing it ain't there, but still going along with them anyway because the alternative was not acceptable. Alternative being a GOP-led Congress. But now you got some people saying, I will not support that anymore. And Democratic Party, you can go do what you want to do, but I'm not playing that game anymore. You running after swing voters that don't exist anymore. We are more polarized now than we've ever been, just as much so, if not more so, than we were in 1860, leading up to the Civil War. And Democrats, some of us, still think there are people out there who need to be persuaded. And what we've got to do is go along with them saying, okay, if you still need to get into your persuasion bag, I'll go along with you for right now because the alternative is not acceptable. But I'm telling you, you better take a look at what time it is because they ain't there. You're preaching to the wind. And I don't mean W-I-N. W-I-N-D is what I'm talking about.
I hear you. And you know what? That's a good place for us to take another break. And then when we come back in the third segment, I want to switch gears completely. Last week, we were fortunate to have Thomas McLaurin on with us from the George Floyd Memorial Center, which it has plans to be constructed here in Raleigh. Just on yesterday, we learned that $27 million settlement with Floyd family over George's murder. I want to talk about that when we come back, and also talk about the Derek Chauvin trial and what we expect to come out of that. And so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up and we'll be talking about the $27 million settlement for the Floyd family in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
We don't want to miss an opportunity in our community to protect ourselves, especially since our community is disproportionately affected in a negative way right now.
And we've got to encourage those in our community to realize that we've got to look forward, and we've got to find ways to be much more trusting and engaging, and recognize the importance of the vaccine in helping us defeat this incredible virus.
And actually, I've been dreading the little pinch of the needle. I didn't even hurt, I didn't even feel it. This is just a win-win-win. And, I would encourage everyone to take advantage of it. It doesn't take a lot of time or effort, and it doesn't even hurt.
You have a spot, get the shot. So that's what Aggies do.
Welcome back to our final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is March 13th, 2021. That's Val Atkinson. We're talking about stuff. We've talked about COVID and being a year. We talked about Val's buddy Mitch McConnell and voting. And Val, last week, like I said, we were fortunate to have Thomas McLaurin from the George Floyd Memorial Center, which is a facility they're looking to build here in Raleigh, about the legacy of George and why it's important to remember what happened to him. Derek Chauvin is the former police officer in Minneapolis who's on trial for his murder. And yesterday, the city of Minneapolis settled $27 million lawsuit with the family. $27 million is a lot of money, Val. You can do a lot with that. But first, your visceral reaction just to the dollar figure in what $27 million means in terms of a settlement for this kind of violence against and murder of George Floyd.
Well, as the sister of George Floyd said, no amount is going to bring George back, and we're all aware of that. So what they don't want to do is to get into a contest of how much is enough or how much is too much and that sort of thing. They felt that there should be some type of repayment on the part of the city of Minneapolis, because of that's where it happened, and they thought it had to do with training, with culture of the police force itself, a lot of things that the city is responsible for. So that's what the money is for. That's what it was laid out for, pain and suffering and so many other things. But what people are talking about now, going beyond just the dollar figure, is the impact that it may or may not have on the criminal trial. This was a civil piece that came up with the $27 million. The criminal trial hadn't even started yet. They're just in the voir dire right now, trying to select a jury. Yeah. And it reminds me something that we used to say in my golfing days, Ed: all bets are won and lost on the first tee box.
Yeah.
Because that's where you negotiate the number of strokes you're going to give or receive, and how you're going to play the rules, how much money you're going to bet, and what are going to be the conditions for having a press or rebet. Or that's where you make it all happen right there. And sometimes if you're not really schooled at designing the conditions of your bet, you've lost before the round even started.
Yeah.
And that's what a voir dire is about in jury selection. That's why it's so critically important If you don't do it right, you've lost before the trial is even gaveled in on the first day.
So you might as well not even say anything. In some cases, you already lost if you don't have the right jury, right? Actually, there's a clip I want everybody to look at. And let's talk about this as well. Let's take a look here.
Who would have known what that change would be? Because it's not just a large financial number. It's deeper than that. The number today changes evaluations in civil rights for a black person when they die. Because what you don't know is the rigged game that we always have to play when we take one of these cases. Because African Americans are not valued high when they are murdered by law enforcement in these cases. And we are changing that precedent. Because as we told you when we filed this lawsuit 6-7 months ago, we are here to support the actual understanding that Black Lives Matter, but you will start understanding that Black value matters.
And that's part of the legal team that negotiated that settlement, Val. And one of the things that I wrote about in my piece yesterday after the award was this whole notion of how much do we even count for, right? You know, the part of the problem is that Derek Chauvin did not believe that George Floyd was even human, because you don't kneel on somebody's neck for nearly 9 minutes if you think they're human and that you're doing, you know, your job as a police officer. The other part in my piece yesterday that I wrote was I looked at the general statute for the state of Minnesota, and it says peace officers can kill somebody, but it has to be justifiable, right? And part of, before you move to the point that you're going to take somebody's life, you should first look at their dignity and their humanity. And it was clear to me, if anybody's seen the video of Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck, that there was no dignity in it, and he did not consider him to be human. So as we listen to the attorney there talk about the settlement, you know, money does talk, but you still got to hire police officers, and we're always talking about that here on this program and the other places we appear. We still don't have the right people in law enforcement, do we, Val?
We do not, and that comes from recruiting, and that needs to be looked at very closely and changed drastically if we're going to ever get a handle on this. Too many people are coming into our law enforcement environments with the whole notion that their job is to clean up the African American problem. Just as we saw it 150 years ago after the Civil War, a lot of military men saw their job is to clean up the Indian problem. And they think that they need to send messages to you and I. They think, Ed, that if you and I see Chauvin's knee on George's neck, we will become afraid. And we don't want that same thing to happen to us or our sons or grandsons. So we will change our behavior, and we will instruct them to change their behavior. That is the plan with wayward police officers, is to send a message so that some of those big bucks, as they used to call us, will see that we mean business. And when we roll up into your community, we expect respect. And if you don't give it to us, you know, anything could happen. But the police, I don't like to use the word defund the police. I love the word refund the police. Refund it in a way that you're paying for the things you want, and don't fund the things you don't want. Refund them.
Yeah, most definitely. Something needs to be done. And one of the things is the House passed the George Form Justice Reform Act, Police Reform Act. It still needs to have a life over in the Senate. I have very deep fears that because of people like all of the Republican delegation, I don't have any faith, including the one black one to have, Tim Scott, who's already talked about being stopped by the police or whatever. He won't even support, some of the reforms that are in there that need to occur. You know, the biggest thing for me as I read that the Reform Act is talking about getting rid of this qualified immunity for police officers. But one of the other things, Val, that I think is pretty clear is that a lot of cities have bad deals. They have bad deals with police unions. And I don't even call them police unions. The Fraternal Order of Police and those other organizations, uh, they barely act as unions. They act as the mob almost. You know, they tell you, okay, we're going to shake you down. We'll protect you, but I got to be protected. My people can't be prosecuted. We won't accept this, that, and the other. And we can violate and break the law all we want to. We don't even have to tell you personnel decisions we make. In a lot of these municipalities, you can't even release police records of bad police officers. And one of the things in the George Floyd Reform Act is that there be a national system of reporting cops who are bad cops so they won't get hired somewhere else. And a lot of people don't want that. So I think we still got a long way to go, and we got some trouble. I'm glad of the $27 million settlement. It doesn't do nearly enough, though. I got to get to a point where they stop killing Black folks.
Absolutely. Until we get to that point, all the rest is just sidebars, and it doesn't help.
Doesn't help at all. You know, Val, you know, we got about 3 or 4 minutes left here. You know, there's always so much news, and we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I do want to end on one note. You know, we started talking about COVID at the beginning, the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown, the COVID relief bill, $1.9 trillion being passed. People are going to start getting money in the next couple of days. And there's provisions in there for people to get checks for their kids every month for the next year. There's a whole bunch of things that are helpful to families and people, unlike the bill that the Republicans passed for tax reform, right? There are $2 trillion and what are we going to be able to do to sort of to sustain the momentum around doing things that help regular working class folks? Do the Democrats have the stomach to revisit healthcare? I guess that's where I'm going, because COVID-19 was a health crisis, and it's fairly clear that, and you talked about this, is the vaccine not being distributed equitably to people who need it. But if we had a national health system, then we wouldn't have to worry about it. In Britain, they're not worrying about it. In Israel, they're not worrying about it. In Australia and other places where they have national health systems, they're able to get this out. Will the Democrats have the guts to revisit healthcare?
I would have to say no. I don't think they will at this time. Give them 3 or 4 more years, or give them a second Biden term, maybe, but not in a first Biden term. I think they're wrestling with too many other things that they consider critically important. But it's all going to happen after something else happens, Ed, which is tackling the filibuster in the Senate. Because whether we're talking healthcare, or whether we're talking police reform, or racial injustices, or whatever it is, not a lot's going to happen if you don't have filibuster reform. If you continue, because there's always going to be 1 or 2 Democrats that may not side with you, just like what happened with the American Rescue Plan. Manchin stopped it dead in his track, and you had to go and appease him before you could go forward. There are going to be other people to do the same thing, because it appears that the Republicans are locked in, and you're not going to be able to pick off 2 or 3 Republicans here or there to make up for the Joe Manchins. So because of that, you need to go in and tackle the provision dealing with the filibuster. You know, this is not like it's a constitutional amendment where you need 2/3 of both houses and 3/4 of the states in order to do this. This whole filibuster thing comes out of Senate Rule 22. And if we can put it in there, it didn't take nobody else. Nobody from the House had anything to do with it. Nobody from the executive branch had anything to do with it. And the Supreme Court can't have anything to do with it. So why can't you change it back the other way? It can be. It just takes guts to do it.
Yeah. You mentioned that, Val, and it's like a lot of things that, I've come to realize as I gotten older is that the whole mythology around how great the American government is, and it's nothing like it, and it works so good, and it works to everybody's benefit. No, it supported slavery. The filibuster was put in so they could thwart, bills to help civil rights after during Reconstruction and afterwards. That a lot of these things are just bad ways to govern. Not having the National Health Service, having the filibuster in there, the way you have to go to reconciliation, and you got to go ask a third party who's not elected whether or not you can put in the minimum wage.
Right.
You're right. The parliamentarian trying to tell you what you can and can't do, and acting like that's sacrosanct and you can't do anything about it. When in fact, like you said, a lot of this is mythology, right? That there is no rule called the filibuster in the Constitution anywhere. It was there for a specific purpose, and it's mostly been used to keep Black folks down. That's just the truth. And people don't want to talk about the truth, Val. But guess what? You come here and get the truth, that means that means that it's about time for us to go. When I say something like that, so before we go, I want you to tell me something I need to look forward to in the week coming up.
I want to congratulate somebody, and that is Chris Cuomo of CNN. And he is the brother of Governor Andrew Cuomo, who is in a lot of hot water right now because of sexual harassment allegations and those kinds of things. And Chris has done a great job of separating business and family. And I think we need to all take our caps off to him, because I know it's been very difficult. That's his flesh and blood. And the subject matter is something that's dear to his heart, the law. So I take my hat off to him. He's done well listening to his producer's advice to stay out of it.
Yeah, I would not. I would not want to be in his position, to have to say anything at all about that. We'll talk about Chris. I'm sure we'll talk about Andrew Cuomo, the governor, coming up in the coming weeks. I just don't see him making it, Val. I mean, I think he's sort of at the end of the rope, and whether the allegations are true or not, it's something we probably need to talk about here. Is what happens when you have those. Of course, if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter. You can grab people by the crotch and it's fine, and have evangelicals follow you.
Right.
But we'll discuss that later. What I think we got really big looking forward to this week is again making sure that Derek Chauvin trial is fair. I did watch some of the feed from the voir dire process of them selecting jurors. Obviously, it's clear that the defense is looking for a certain kind of juror by the questions they're asking, but that always happens, Val. Seating a jury in that trial is going to be really difficult. It's going to be interesting. I just want the trial to be fair. One good thing that happened is they reinstated the third-degree murder charge to be considered at the same time. And then you go, well, isn't he being charged with second degree murder and also manslaughter? Yes. So what that does, though, it allows the judge to instruct them on multiple charges. So if they eliminate the more serious charge, they could convict him on a lesser charge. So he gets some time in jail. Again, my piece this week was about the fact that, he needs to be under the jail, but sometimes our expectations don't match with what juries do, because juries have their life of their own. Is really determined, like you said, Val, by the voir dire process, and how defense teams get the people on the jury that can influence the jury in such a way that the outcome comes out like they want to. Well, that's another hour of your life that you can't get back. That's Val. I'm Ed. You're watching The Deal. Go out and do something good for somebody today, and then we'll see you back here next Saturday.